Hey there, sister.
Hey, friend. How's it going?
Well, living the dream every day. I mean, it's
Every
hard to
day.
believe that we're still talking about RaDonda Vaught's case.
Oh my God, we're still talking about RaDonda Vaught's case?
We are still talking about this situation.
Why are we still talking about this case, Maggie?
Well,
It was so
interesting.
long ago.
It was a hot minute ago. I mean, how many years are we in now?
December 2017 was the date of the event. So we are
We're a hot minute in.
7 years in now.
But I don't think that a lot of people know that it was just back into the media again. I don't think that a lot of people fully understand why we are here on the Conversing Nurse podcast for Nurse.org. Going to be doing a 4-part series talking about RaDonda Vaught.
Mm-hmm. Not just necessarily me.
True
But
story.
we'll talk about the Board of Nursing, specifically that case. We're not really going to get into the criminal aspects of it, but we're going to talk about the Board of Nursing case. The reason, because it's still ongoing. It's still ongoing. We've gone through some appeals, and we'll talk about why. But ultimately, this isn't about getting a license back. I think first and foremost that needs to be said. This is about, let's establish some ground rules for how boards of nursing operate and how they go about investigating nurses. That's the real big issue here, and there really isn't. And Maggie can attest to that. There really isn't. By the way, y'all, hey, I'm RaDonda Vaught. We're still talking about my case.
I am Advocate Maggie, CEO Advocates for Nurses, and we have the honor of being on the Conversing Nurse podcast with Nurse.org and talking about her very case. And just like she said, we're not talking about anything else besides the board of nursing. Something that, again, the reason why we've come together is because this is so near and dear to my heart. And what she says, some of the stuff that she goes through is the stuff that I talk about almost every day with nurses.
And why do you
Maggie
talk about that
Ortiz,
every day?
because
Is it
it's
because
so
you hear from
happening
nurses every day? Yeah, every
about
day.
very things that you were subjected to as it pertains to your case. So, so I'm Advocate Maggie, CEO Advocates for Nurses, created Advocates for Nurses. I have been a nurse for 25 years, actually, this year. All my career has been primarily in a hospital setting, ICU, ER, pre-op, PACU, endo, IR, cath lab. I did spend time at a board of nursing. I was a civil expert, an administrative expert. And so the bulk of what I do now to date is just educating nurses, helping lawyers when nurses are under investigation. And so that's what, I'll let RaDonda introduce herself, and it's going to become no mystery how we cross paths.
I mean, I don't remember exactly when it was that we actually first connected. I want to say it was probably shortly after my criminal trial.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
which so that would
know.
have been 2022 sometime.
Yeah. Of
Yeah,
course, I've
so
been
you've
set.
only known me as a felon.
Story, true
This is a true
story.
story. So before that, before I became a felon, I was a nurse. I got a bachelor's of science in nursing from Western Kentucky University and a certificate in leadership, and graduated in 2014, got licensed in 2015. My husband and I live in Middle Tennessee, about an hour north of Nashville, on a farm. And, my life goal was never actually to be a nurse from a child. But once I did engage in that path, I started working at Vanderbilt within about 9 months of becoming licensed, fell in love with it, stopped the DNP program that I was in because because I loved it so much being in the neuro ICU, and I wanted to stay there. And the DNP program that I was in only offered family nurse practitioner. And I realized that I had a real passion for being in the hospital, but more so, I had a real passion for being with the patients. And so I thought, I'm staying here, until I feel like I am ready to move on with my career. But I loved it so much. So, yeah, I was about 3 years into my licensure when this medication error happened.
And that's the other reason why I think it's imperative for us to be talking about this. And again, thank you for the Conversing Nurse for allowing us to do this,
Hmm.
because the stuff that you get subjected to literally falls under 3 different types of law. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about over the next
I have a
4
question, Maggie.
series. Yes,
What are
ma'am.
those 3 types of law?
Oh, RaDonda, thank you for asking.
You're
That would be
welcome.
administrative, that would be civil, and that would be criminal. So those are the basics. Now there's some nuances within there, but essentially, when you're a nurse, those are the three types of law that you could be held accountable under just by merely holding a professional license.
Mhm.
So I don't think that there is number one knowledge gap. You don't.
Absolutely.
Ditto, me as well.
I had no idea.
None,
No
none,
idea.
none. When you
So
get
let's
handed
talk
that
about those 3
license
areas. Like, here's what they are, and most lay people don't even understand this. Just from my perspective, let's give them examples. So I'm a licensed nurse. My nursing license is regulated under administrative law, and that looks different in every state, but most states have a board of nursing or some administrative cohort of people like that. And their sole job is to regulate licensures of health professionals, i.e., all of the other things. And then you have civil. So in my case, that would have been, if the family were to have sued me, for monetary damages. So civil is an individual citizen suing another individual citizen for monetary damages. Administrative is regulating any sort of professional licensure, whether that's nursing, a facility, whatever it may be. If you hold a license, there is an administrative body that governs that and a set of laws, the Administrative Procedure Act, that regulates that. Then criminal. So criminal is actually, a crime. There is each state has an annotated code of law that describes at varying levels what crimes look like. This is what a crime is. This is how it's described, for legal professional reasons. And criminal law is investigated by state bureaus of investigations, local law enforcement, sheriff's departments, district attorneys, police, etc. If you are found to be potentially guilty, then they will indict you and charge you, and then you will go through the process of proving whether you are innocent or guilty, of said accused crime. So that's where we are. There's three very different things, and those don't necessarily overlap. I mean, there can be some overlap there, but I guess I say that to say there's no call for them to work together the way we think about that in healthcare. We think about in healthcare there's interdisciplinary and we're all a team, right? That is absolutely not how things work in the eyes of the law, really in any capacity of law. So those
and
are
when a
all
nurse when does a nurse realize that? When does that fruition come?
oh, when it is way too late. When it is
And I don't laugh,
absolutely
I don't. It's
too
just
late.
that's every single day, and this
Every
is the
day.
reason why,
Every day.
I
Every business do you get a call every business day
know.
from a new person?
Or an email or a direct message or
Yeah,
a comment or I'm on all these social, so there is no shortage of this. Yes,
yeah,
oftentimes related around the stuff they for nurses, 90%, I believe this is like the ANA attorney was talking about this and something again, I always say I'm not the end all to be all, especially when it comes to statistics, but a nurse is 90% more likely to stand in front of administrative law, board of
correct.
nursing than civilly or criminally. Now, like
Well,
we're
because
done said,
that's the first avenue,
yes.
right?
And we're low
That's the
hanging fruit. For
well, and
nurses,
that's the
for an
job.
RN, for an
Yeah,
RN, so a nurse practitioner that may, or, a nurse anesthetist or
mhm,
someone who is a licensed independent practitioner, their numbers may go up because
right,
they're they could lead to causation, right? Causing where oftentimes it's not solely based on the nurse, and that gets in a lot of nuances. And I'm speaking a little bit out of turn there, but
yeah.
you're more
So
likely.
nurses are gonna wind up in front of the board of nursing, most likely, and the reason is because you are a licensed professional. You have a standard set of rules, whatever that looks like in your state, that you are supposed to abide by, your standards of practice, whatever that's called in your state. the ANA sets that, and at the state level, there are certain things, every state is different. Every administrative body in every state is different, but ultimately they have one job, and that is to protect the public from unsafe nursing practice. And so when unsafe nursing practice is recognized and reported, you're going to stand in front of the board of nursing. That's why nurses are 90% more likely to stand in front of, an administrative body than any other body. Um, Also, quick fact, when we think about adverse events in a hospital, what causes patient harm, almost half of those, and I heard Rita Jew from ISMP talk about this multiple times, but almost half of the adverse events that occur in hospitals to patients are medication related events.
I believe it.
Who's pushing those medications, Maggie?
Nurses.
Nurses. So, of half of the events in hospitals that harm or potentially harm patients are going to happen with a nurse directly involved with the medication administration. There you go. That's a direct route
Yeah.
to your board of nursing.
And if it leads to a sentinel event, some of the things that I didn't even realize until I was at the board of nursing, there are certain things that do have to be reported. So in
Mhm.
my state of Texas, for example, and then pivoting on again, what you're saying that every state is different. There are rules or regulations. Texas says if it's 5 minor instances or a major instance, and those, a sentinel event would be considered, a major instance that would happen, that's mandatory reporting. So more than 5 minor instances. So what you would consider a trend in behavior and a major instance, or some states may even say like a termination of a nurse. There is oftentimes criteria because now if you're a chief nursing officer, I have different roles as well. I don't have
Right.
a choice. Now I do
Well, I
have
can
to
tell you in
report.
my case, right, that's what
Mhm.
happened. So this was a major event, a sentinel event. Um, and
So is
that's
that what
exactly what happened.
generates your
Right.
complaint initially?
Correct. That was. So this event happened on December 26, 2017. And the very next time that I was back at Vanderbilt was on January 3rd of 2018. And that's when I was terminated. So I was issued a copy of, this termination letter. And I was told by the A&O that this would be sent over to the Board of Nursing in the state of Tennessee. And that would serve as essentially notification of a complaint to them for, and interestingly enough, the way that it was worded, it didn't say anything about it being a sentinel event. What it did say was that a serious safety event occurred, said nothing about the death of a patient or the outcome of the patient. To quote the A&O who gave me the letter, she stated it was written in a very benign way, benign being the word that she used. And it was, but it also stated that I failed to follow medication administration policy. And that was the reason I was being terminated without eligibility for rehire. So that was sent to the Board of Nursing. I was told it would be sent to the Board of Nursing, and I was told that it would be several months before I heard anything. And I was told, go find another job. You can keep working. No, nothing to see here. Wait till they contact you. That's kind of how that's how that
Okay.
initially played out. I just waited to be contacted.
So as a prior investigator, that would have landed on my desk. I would have opened up their file and I would have seen what they were saying. And then that's when I, as the investigator, would have generated on or about this date, this time, you gave a medication that caused, and I would just quote, a serious safety outcome. I'm
Mhm.
going to need your response within 30 days. Here is some basic information I need back from you, your resume, stuff around the event. There's a questionnaire. Then the next letter that would be to you, sent certified mail. The next letter, I would be reaching out to the CNO from the organization, telling him or her that I was going to have to reach out to medical records to obtain the records of said individual involved in this. Then I would be asking for your employee file. I'd be
Mhm.
asking for the policy for medication administration, and then any evidence based science, because the investigator should be a nurse who should be looking at the case. Now, for myself, I worked in the ICU, so then I understand some things as it pertains to medication. But if not, one of the things that they should be doing is reaching out to expert. But the other reason why we are here is because I too have concerns about the
Yeah.
way that things are handled, and I don't want to get the cart before the horse. But just so people understand, so the next thing that you would have gotten in the mail, and then kind of speak to this, would have been a letter from, or
Hmm.
oftentimes, again, to your point as well, every state is different. Depending on
Yes.
the evidence is sent, would be dictate whether that would be a call or an email versus a letter. Once the letter is sent, those are considered oftentimes allegations, and you have to give a response. You are fully under investigation, outside of where some states will call, try to get some basic information before
That's
they.
what happened in Tennessee.
Okay,
So there was nothing officially sent, no allegations. It was actually 8 months after I was terminated before I ever heard anything. So an 8-month period went by. As a nurse, I did it took me 6 months. I finally went back to work. I didn't know how long this was going to take. So I just waited to hear from them. And it was a phone call, maybe a phone call and an email asking me to come in for an interview with a nurse investigator from the Tennessee Department of Health. So in the state of Tennessee, the Board of Nursing falls under the Tennessee Department of Health.
very important
Again,
fact.
in different
Very,
states, I
yep.
don't know how that works. I just know from state to state, I've learned that it is different. So I get a call from this investigator. She asks me to come in. I come in. We sit
By
down in a
yourself,
room.
by
Hmm?
yourself, by yourself.
Yeah, by myself. I came in by myself. I didn't even think about getting an attorney. I didn't think I needed one. Um, I don't know. I'm not like I'm naive. I was extremely naive, Maggie. Extremely
This is
naive.
everyone. This is all of us. This is the majority of people I talk to. And
Yeah.
even when I was an investigator, the majority of nurses would, respond or reach back out, where a physician will lawyer up. Not a chance. Do I know this
Right.
100%? I don't.
Why do they
Mm.
lawyer up?
Because
Because they realize that they have something to protect. And I
yes,
can say this in hindsight now. My advice to anyone is know your rights. Number 1, um, you don't have to speak to anyone. You should first and foremost protect your rights and your license. And your refusal to speak to someone does not mean that you are guilty.
it's
It does
not that
not
you're
mean that you are innocent.
refusing. You're
It
not.
means that you are educated and you know how to protect your rights. That's it.
You're
That's it.
waiting to have your legal counsel respond to them. You're not refusing to speak to them. But your
Right.
next question is, am I allowed legal counsel? You absolutely are.
Hey,
And
Maggie, I have a question. When you have a specialty issue inside the hospital, are you going to continue to see the hospitalist? Are
oh,
they going to call in a specialist?
yes.
Right. So now this is a nurse moving outside of their specialty practice in healthcare as a nurse. You're being interviewed by a legal administrative system. You need someone who speaks that language. You
Say that
don't speak
again.
that language,
I don't think that people understand that.
right? Yeah. So we're going to talk about all of that. We're going to talk about, what this whole process was like going through the Board of Nursing. We're going to go through the documentation along the way from, January 3rd, 2018, all the way to the most current, which I think was it February? February that I went back before the Tennessee Court of Appeals. So there's years of things to talk about, but we're going to sum it up in a way that better prepares you.
Digestible.
Right.
Digestible.
You need to understand as a nurse, this isn't about, again, this is not about the mistake. We're not going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about the criminal charges. We're going to talk about what I learned along the way and how this affected my license. And not only how this affected my license, but how this is going to affect your license. This isn't about me. My goal is never to get my license back. My goal is to have some accountability across the board. Nurses are going to be accountable for their actions. Hospitals are going to be accountable for their actions. State boards of nursing, or whoever that administrative body is, who is supposed to protect the public and regulate nursing licensure, they also need to be held accountable for doing that because that did not happen. That did not happen. Let me repeat myself. That did not happen the first time around. The state of Tennessee, the Department of Health, the Board of Nursing, the Office of Investigations, they had an obligation to public safety that they did not meet because they
Duty.
failed to do anything to my license. They
And
swept it under the rug.
what was the
They
difference in the evidence the first time to the second time?
What was the difference in the evidence?
Nothing, right?
From me, nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing. Nothing.
So
So
these are
what I was
nuances under administrative law, like
Mhm,
Radon is saying, that I think we're not here to talk about the case. We're here to talk about the nuances because it's all falls under the lack of what I now know to be due process, not extended to nurses when they're under investigation.
mhm.
Because like we're done the first time around. Why you should have been disciplined the first time around. This should have
Absolutely, I
never
should have
gone
been.
to criminal. Yes, the family should have been, written a check that should have been handled civilly the way it's supposed to, but never criminally. And to your point, what happened from the first time to the second time is just mind blowing to me
Mhm.
because there's no new evidence.
No new
There's
evidence.
absolutely no new evidence.
Right.
So,
Because
like,
they're not looking the Board of Nursing is not looking at anyone else except for me
correct.
and my nursing
Yes.
practice. That's it. So when they ultimately charge me with unprofessional conduct, abandoning a patient, and failure to maintain a record, i.e., I did not document what I gave, they were all aware.
The
They were
first time.
aware of all of that. We had a 2-hour recorded conversation. They were aware of those things. Why didn't you take any action the first time? You absolutely should have. And I say you, they. They absolutely should have. I was shocked, shocked that they didn't do anything, fully expecting. I told my nurse educator the day this happened, of among other things, one of the things that I said was, I'm going to lose my license. I said, I could have killed this patient. She hadn't passed yet. I could have just killed this patient. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose my license. I'm going to go to jail. You know, I was fully prepared to not to lose my license or to have some sort of action taken against it. At minimum, maybe you go back and look over med safety, medication administration, pharmacology, something. Um,
Education,
Maybe an
comment,
evaluation of me as a nurse to see, are
fit to
mentally,
practice.
are you fit to practice? Yeah, you killed a patient. Let's check in here and make sure that you are mentally appropriate to step back into this role in patient care. Because our job as the Board of Nursing is not to protect nurses, it's to protect the public.
Say that again because I don't think that enough
The
people know
job
that.
of the Board of Nursing is not to protect nurses. The Board of Nursing's job is to regulate nursing practice in the interest of public safety. Their job is to protect the public from unsafe nursing practice. They will inherently side with the public because that's their job. Their job is to make sure that nurses are practicing safely and that when there is a complaint, it is handled and the nurse is reprimanded appropriately because their job is to protect the public. So you think that you would go before a jury of your peers, a bunch of nurses, and just talk candidly with them and explain what happened. But that's not going to be the case because that's their job isn't to empathize or sympathize with you as a nurse. Their job is to protect the public.
And a lot of these
Period.
nuances we're gonna, like you said, we're gonna be talking about over the next, series. But this is the lack, I think, of knowledge for all nurses. Even myself,
Mhm.
I did not have a mere fraction of this, just like you did, until you know my path is being different. But I was just, I was shocked. So my first crossover is as an investigator. My second crossover is to civil cases where due process happens. I'm like,
Mhm.
Wait a second here.
Hey, Maggie,
Wait a second. What
what's
is
due
happening?
process? Let's talk
Well,
about
let's
that
start.
because I think there's a lot of assumptions here. You know, we watch criminal television, right? We don't usually watch civil law. No one's watching court TV.
Sure.
We think of law, we think
Law and
of
Order.
criminal law,
Yeah.
law and order, whatever those other things are. I don't know. But dun 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 dun
Probably not supposed to be
dun.
plugging this. We might have to get this out. We're not supposed to be in, but we
We're
might have to
sorry.
disclose this on the on the post worksheet.
But but that's what we think of,
Yes,
right? We're not legal professionals, so
correct.
we are lay people in terms of the law and our understanding of that. So, due process is kind of that assumption that we as lay people in terms of the law, when I say we, I mean nurses, we think about due process as, well, it's you are given the opportunity to prove your innocence and that there's a checklist of things along the way, same as admitting a patient when you come into the emergency department, right?
I
You
too
admit
thought that
them,
I
assess
too had that
them,
very
make
illusion
a
when I
plan,
mm-mm.
but that isn't the case. That there is no, and maybe in criminal law there is an expectation of that, but that's their own, that's we again, we as nurses, lay people to the legal system have this belief that this is what we see, that you're going to get a chance to prove yourself, and
And
you're
is this
not going to
true in
be
every
charged
single state?
multiple times, right, with the same thing. We're not going to go back
The
over and
other
over
thing.
again and investigate you. But those things do not apply in other areas of the law. And when I say other areas of law, I'm specifically talking about the Administrative Procedures Act, which governs whatever administrative body that is responsible for your nursing license. Those things don't apply there.
On
And
double
so
jeopardy,
mhm,
you can be charged in more than one state. So let's just
correct,
say you get disciplined in Nevada and you do hold a Texas license, you can be real sure you will be investigated. Now, Texas will look at the conduct and decide you will be if you will be disciplined or not, but you sure can be, even if your license is expired. So when you talk about due process, those are some of the things that the nuances I don't think that nurses realize
right,
that or you're not going to be given your full and complete file. You that letter that I talked about, if it got to the allegation point with that letter, that could have been 2 years ago. That could have
mhm,
been 15 years ago because there's no statute of limitations for a board
correct,
of nursing complaint. So now they're asking you to respond within 30 days to, two initials because you're not going to get HIPAA information, some
correct,
numbers while you worked at this job that was maybe 10 years ago, 5 years ago. You know how many jobs I've had? Are you joking me? And they're like, give me your response within 30 days. Now,
right,
you may remember the event, right? Okay, let's just say it was something, very someone coded, you know what I mean? Like yours, you may have some memories, but I even was trained at national training that, and this is a common sense argument. Every second you're away from the event,
mhm,
you start to lose memories. Then you say it
absolutely.
so many times. Now you're interjecting stuff that you heard someone else say. This is all stuff that's out there as fact. So, do you really have an independent knowledge and you're asked within 30 days? Is that due process?
No,
Mm-mm. No, my
no.
friends.
I think it's important that they understand that, we as nurses understand there's several things about administrative law that's different. You are 90% more likely you're going to stand in front of a board of nursing. You will not be given that due process. You will not be handed a packet of information wrapped up in a nice bundle for you to review. You can be investigated more than one time, investigated, closed, open right back up, same exact event, and now charged with administrative, law code and have your license disciplined or revoked. And there's no time limit on this. I mean, I've
Who
talked to people who have been
who are you gonna
reported
tell?
years later.
Who will you tell?
Who are you going to tell? Nobody. Nobody.
Who oversees these entities? I mean, but surely someone oversees these entities.
No, a state governor in the Tennessee, the state governor appoints someone over the board of nursing. I don't know what that position is, maybe a chair or something ahead of board of nursing. But then you have people with, there's more than one person. So you have this one person at the top, they're just appointed.
I was
The governor
shocked when I
doesn't
learned this. I
they
was
don't go back and
shocked.
overview. So yeah, you're correct, Maggie. If I well, this is what happened actually. So the second time I was called in, um, I asked them, "Hey, you guys just sent me this letter in the mail stating you concluded your first investigation. I'm confused about why you're asking me, to come back and talk about this again." And investigator just says, you know, take that up with the general counsel, the attorney for the Office of Investigations. I don't know. I just got this packet of information and was told to call and ask you some questions.
And
Called
they
the
told you,
attorney, heard nothing back. There is no one. There you can complain. If I said I complain about you, Maggie, I could go to your boss. So you don't have one. It's just you. It's just Maggie. So I complain to Maggie, and guess who comes back with a resolution? Guess who looks at it? Guess who investigates that complaint? It all happens right
and
there.
people think that we're crazy, you know this, right? So this is
Oh,
why
for
we're
sure. When
still
I explain
here
this to
talking
people,
about your case.
yeah,
Because again, this is your case just went through the Supreme Court again,
100%.
and we're going to talk
Um,
about that. And then the other thing is that I went to my representatives in the state of Texas,
mhm.
and I said, the public health committee, to be specific, and I said, who would you like to call? Call the governor. All those people, they said, sitting there with their jaw dropped. I'm like, yeah, now do your job. Do your job. Do your
Right?
job.
Yeah, because there isn't. And again, this it
I
seems
wish this was hyperbole. I wish this was hyperbole, but
maybe you and me
why
both.
I'm pursuing
You and
law
me
school
both.
at 51, why we're here, why we're
Mhm.
still talking about this 7
Why I'm
years
still
later.
going through this appeal process when my license was revoked in 2021. Why are we still working on this? We're working on this because the system has to improve, right? The system has to improve. The point is the Board of Nursing has a responsibility, but there's no one there to oversee what they're doing, and that's not fair or safe.
So that's why you're taking your case there, because
Mhm.
if there was in law, and I'm a baby on this journey, and please anyone chime in who has way more knowledge than I do. I'm not the end all to be all. But if you don't set some kind of record or precedence, right? That's how it's
Mhm.
referenced, then nothing can ever come to fruition. So when your
Correct.
case was presented, and we're gonna go into some of these nuances, and you're gonna read actually, because I think it's important for people to actually. Again, this is not hyperbole. Let me just read you. She's going to read you words from
Mhm.
actual documents, facts. So your case going back to why are we still here? It's
Yeah,
being presented in front of the Supreme Court again. Why, Redonda? Why is it being presented? Just so it's
because there's
2025 March. When was it presented?
what's that?
When it
When was
was
it?
like it was February, right? It was
Yeah,
February
February of this year. February of this year, it made
2025.
it to the Tennessee Court of Appeals, and it was heard, argued, in front of 3 Tennessee Supreme Court justices who will, take several months and listen over it, but their job is to look at these cases that are coming before them, and they are going to heavily rely on legal cases that have been settled that are specific to this type of case, complaint, etc.
And
And they're going to
law.
rely on the law. What does the law say? And what precedent has been set by evidence, cases in the past, so that we can look at those too. And they kept asking, what cases do you have to support this? Both sides, my attorney and I think it's the state attorney general that is representing the Board of Nursing and the Department of Health in this. So neither of them have anything. There is no case law.
And there's the why,
There is no
folks.
case law
And there's the
to
why.
support a decision either way on this.
This is why we
This
need this. This is why
this
this
is
is
why we have to,
so
because
needed.
no one has taken it this far.
And
No one
thank
has.
you for doing
Yeah.
that. I cannot imagine how painful this is for you. And I think that's the other thing that's lost on people because they don't really
This is just
understand.
the
And I
right
don't
thing
fault
to
them.
do.
It is, and I
It's the
applaud
right thing to
you.
do.
There, it
You know,
has to be gotten at several different ways. Yes, I
here's
can go
the
to
thing,
law school.
Maggie.
I can do some things, but it will take a case.
It will. Let me tell you why this is the right thing to do. I'm gonna step way back out of my shoes and into someone else's shoes. The shoes of that family, the shoes of the Murphy family. Okay? If you are a family member or a patient who is involved in a serious safety event, or God forbid, a sentinel event, most people just want number one, answers, and number two, how are you going to make sure this never happens again? I want to know what happened, number one. And number two, I want to make sure it never happens to another patient and another family member. Someone's job is to answer those two questions, tell you what happened, and make sure it's never going to happen again. At the facility level, they tell, they can tell the family what happened. They can say, we fired this nurse. But that doesn't prevent said nurse or doctor, whomever, from continuing to potentially make this mistake. Who does that fall to? That falls to the State Board of Nursing. In Tennessee, it falls to the State Board of Nursing. I was reported as a family member. The hospital has told them, we've reported this nurse. She will be investigated. Here I am as a family member. What I want to see most likely is, I just don't want you to have a license because I don't want you to be able to do this to another person. At minimum, I want to make sure, even if it's not to the extreme, I don't want you to have a license. I want to make sure that you are corrected, punished, in whatever way you want to use that word. Your license is addressed. We looked at you. Whatever needs to happen is going to happen. So the state of Tennessee failed the Murphy family by doing absolutely nothing in 10 months' time, Maggie. Nothing. Concluding their investigation with a letter to me and a letter back to Vanderbilt University Medical Center and the CNO. I have copies of all three of them. They all basically state exactly the same thing. Thanks for your participation. As you know, we have a duty to investigate complaints because our obligation is to the public safety. Thank you for your participation, for your cooperation. We have concluded this investigation. We are not taking any action against this nurse or their license, and no record of this will appear on the licensure file.
This
Consider
is
this
called
matter
a
resolved.
CWAP, close without prejudice, is referenced oftentimes by the board, a CWAP.
Right. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. Do you think, Maggie, that the Tennessee Department of Health, Office of Investigation, and Board of Nursing had an obligation to that family, or did it sound like they had an obligation to someone else?
Because again, you and I both know there were deviations from the standard of care. So at
Yeah,
minimum, some of the stuff that you talked about early on, a course, a fine, some kind
correct.
of what they do eventually, unprofessional conduct. There are
Right,
specific language, if a nurse gives the wrong medication, or they just, they'll put you, especially because you're a newer nurse under five
right.
years, which I'm about, not disciplining nurses under 5 years. If there's a re-education opportunity, maybe you get offered a program like you talked about, 6 months, whatever it
Right.
is. But if it's under 5 years of a nurse being within the profession, that's some of those things that should be looked at. And that's
Nothing.
not,
None of that was done. No one made sure, no one checked to make sure I was safe, mentally safe and okay. And even that, again, the putting myself in someone else's shoes, the most basic thing that they have to do. We want to break this down NCLEX level style. You got to answer those questions and get your license, and they are written to the most basic standard. Well, the most basic standard that a licensure, a regulating body of your license has to do is to protect the public. And they failed to do that. They failed to do it. And I never would have fought them. I never would have fought them on that because I am well aware of where I failed to protect Miss Murphy. I'm well aware of that. Never would have fought it.
I agree. Even as an advocate, if you or your legal team would have been, reached out, I'd have been like, you're going to have to take some
You're
sanctions.
going to have to take,
It's
yeah,
not
absolutely.
optional. You deviated from the standard of care. Here are the
Correct.
deviations. Let's try to minimize this. But I would have been asking, in your legal teams, you'll see often ask, because you've been a nurse for less than 5 years, that
Mhm.
argument still applies, may have still been asking to drop, but maybe doing some of this education and stuff. And I think that here's a great opportunity for us to, wind it up. This is the stuff that we could go on
Yeah.
forever and ever and ever over the next next
We can, and we
three.
will, but
Oh,
not
no,
right
we
now.
are. Yeah, 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 yeah. Over the next, 3 series. So she read from you basically one document, The Close Without Prejudice. So that's a factual document. This is not stuff we're making up. And the next 2 episodes, going to continue to read from some documents, go through the process as it pertains to the board of nursing, because I do believe that her and I know at this point why we cross paths. It's for that. It's the lack of
Mhm.
education that nurses have about the investigative process and what that truly means when anyone reaches out to you, and it can cross over to other types of law. And I would love to tell you that, RaDonda, you're the only person that's crossed my path as a
Oh, I'm
nurse,
not.
but this, it's not. You and I both
No,
talk to too many people
way
day
too
in and
many.
day out that it does cross over to 3 types of law. And now the nurse is just trying to hold on to the
Mhm.
professional license. So, in the series, again, thank you to Nurse.org. As we wrap
Thank
this up,
you.
please be sure to like, follow, share on Nurse.org. Check them out. There's also articles there. They're on Instagram, The Conversing Nurse. It's on Spotify, Apple. Please be sure to check them out on the Conversing Nurse podcast and follow them. And anything else before as we wind it up? And we'll be seeing you in the next
Yeah,
couple episodes. I'm so honored again to be here with you and to help advocate and educate our people. Thank you for
yeah.
hopping on and us doing this. I'm
Just a big
super
shout out
honored.
to Nurse.org. I really appreciate them seeing that there is an important thing to talk about here and just giving me an opportunity to put this information in front of nurses because I genuinely do care. This isn't self-serving. I've got nothing to gain from this. I'm well aware that I'll never get a license back, but I have a lot of knowledge and experience that I want to share with my profession because I love and care deeply about it. And I also love and care deeply about the patients that we cared for. So there's a bigger reason here. And, thanks for giving me the opportunity. And thank you guys for listening. We'll see you in the next couple episodes.
See you on the flip side and stay safe out there, nurses. Advocate Maggie out.